Sarah Martinez had always been the type of person who noticed things others missed. Walking through downtown San Diego that sunny Tuesday afternoon, she carried groceries in both hands while heading to her small apartment. The 26-year-old nurse had just finished a double shift at the local hospital and felt exhaustion creeping into her bones. The busy street buzzed with typical afternoon traffic. Cars honked, people chatted on phones, and the usual city noise filled the air. Sarah moved carefully along the sidewalk, trying not to bump into the crowd of pedestrians rushing in different directions. That's when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. A sharp screech of tires followed by a loud crash that made her heart jump. Sarah turned toward the intersection just 50 feet away and saw something that made her blood run cold. A red sedan had slammed into the side of a white pickup truck with tremendous force. The pickup truck had flipped onto its side, steam rising from under its crushed hood. The red car sat in the middle of the street, its front end completely smashed. Glass sparkled across the asphalt like deadly diamonds. Other pedestrians had stopped walking and were pointing at the scene, some pulling out their phones to record videos. But Sarah wasn't watching like the others. Her nursing training kicked in immediately and she dropped her grocery bags without thinking. Cans of soup rolled across the sidewalk as she ran toward the accident. Her tired legs found new energy as adrenaline surged through her system. The first thing she noticed was the silence coming from both vehicles. No screaming, no calling for help. Just the hiss of steam and the tick of cooling metal. That worried her more than any noise would have. People who weren't making sounds after crashes like this were usually in serious trouble. Sarah reached the red sedan first. The driver, a middle-aged man in a business suit, sat slumped over his steering wheel. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, but his chest moved up and down steadily. He was breathing, which was good news. She could see he was unconscious but stable for the moment. She quickly looked around and saw that other people were already calling 911 on their phones. Good. Help would be coming. But as she moved toward the overturned pickup truck, she realized help might not arrive fast enough. The truck lay on its passenger side, and she could see someone trapped inside. Through the spider-webbed windshield, she spotted a young woman about her own age, conscious but clearly in pain. The woman's eyes met Sarah's through the broken glass, and Sarah could see the fear and desperation in them. "Help me," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible over the street noise. "I can't move my legs." Sarah's heart pounded as she assessed the situation. The truck's roof had caved in slightly, pinning the woman inside. Worse yet, Sarah could smell something that made her stomach drop. Gasoline. She looked under the vehicle and saw a dark puddle spreading across the pavement. Fuel was leaking from the damaged tank. This was about to become much more dangerous than just a car accident. If that gasoline caught fire, the woman trapped inside wouldn't have a chance. Sarah knew she had maybe minutes, possibly less, before the situation turned deadly. She could hear sirens in the distance, but they sounded far away. Too far away. The emergency crews wouldn't make it in time if the fuel ignited. Sarah looked around desperately, hoping someone with more experience or better equipment might step forward to help. But the growing crowd of onlookers just stood there, taking pictures and videos with their phones. Some people were already posting the accident on social media instead of actually helping. A few good Samaritans had approached the man in the sedan, but nobody else seemed willing to get close to the overturned truck with its spreading pool of gasoline. Sarah realized with crystal clarity that she might be this woman's only hope for survival. Every second that passed increased the danger. She had seen enough accident victims during her nursing career to know that internal injuries could be getting worse by the minute. Plus, the fuel leak made everything more urgent. Taking a deep breath, Sarah moved closer to the truck. The woman inside looked at her with pleading eyes, and Sarah made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She wasn't going to walk away and let someone die while waiting for help to arrive. "What's your name?" Sarah called out, trying to keep her voice calm and reassuring. "Jessica," the woman replied weakly. "Please don't leave me." "I'm Sarah and I'm a nurse," she said, already examining the situation more closely. "I'm not going anywhere, Jessica. We're going to get you out of there." Sarah had no idea yet just how much that promise would cost her, or how many people would witness what she was about to do. All she knew was that someone needed help, and she was the only person there who seemed willing and able to provide it. The smell of gasoline grew stronger, and Sarah realized their window of time was closing fast. Sarah dropped to her knees beside the overturned truck, ignoring the sharp pieces of glass that bit through her scrubs. She needed to get a better look at Jessica's condition before attempting any rescue. Through the shattered driver's side window, which now faced upward, she could see that Jessica was conscious but trapped beneath the dashboard that had been pushed down by the impact. "Jessica, can you feel your legs?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice steady despite the growing panic in her chest. The gasoline smell was getting stronger, and she could see vapor rising from the spreading puddle beneath the vehicle. I can't feel anything below my waist," Jessica replied, tears streaming down her face. "Am I going to die?" Sarah's nursing experience told her this was likely a spinal injury, which made the rescue incredibly dangerous. Moving someone with potential spinal damage could cause permanent paralysis or worse. But leaving Jessica trapped in a vehicle that could explode at any moment wasn't an option either. The sirens were getting closer, but Sarah estimated they were still at least 5 minutes away. 5 minutes felt like forever when dealing with leaking gasoline. She had seen car fires during her time in the emergency room. They spread incredibly fast and burned extremely hot. Jessica wouldn't survive if the fuel ignited. "Listen to me, Jessica," Sarah said firmly, reaching through the broken window to touch the woman's shoulder. "I'm going to get you out, but I need you to stay very still. Don't try to move at all, okay?" Sarah looked around desperately for something she could use as tools. A few feet away, she spotted a crowbar that had fallen from the back of the pickup truck during the crash. She grabbed it and returned to the vehicle, her mind racing through possible solutions. The truck's doors were completely jammed from the impact and the way the vehicle had landed. The only way to reach Jessica would be through the windshield opening. But first, Sarah needed to clear away more of the broken glass to create a safe passage. Using her jacket to protect her hands, Sarah began carefully removing larger pieces of shattered glass from the windshield frame. Each piece she pulled away created more space, but also caused tiny fragments to rain down on Jessica inside the truck. "Close your eyes," Sarah instructed, working as quickly as she dared. "I'm clearing a path to get you out." As she worked, more people began gathering around the accident scene. Someone had directed traffic away from the area, and Sarah could hear people talking nervously about the gasoline smell. A few bystanders offered to help, but Sarah knew that untrained people attempting to move someone with potential spinal injuries could make things much worse. "Has anyone seen any emergency responders yet?" Sarah called out, not taking her eyes off her work. "Fire truck just turned the corner," someone replied. "Maybe 2 minutes away, 2 minutes." Sarah looked at the growing pool of gasoline and made a decision. She couldn't wait. The vapors were getting thicker, and all it would take was one spark from the damaged electrical system or hot metal to create a catastrophic fire. She positioned herself carefully at the windshield opening and spoke to Jessica in her most reassuring voice. "I'm coming in to get you. This might hurt a little, but I need you to trust me and stay completely still." Sarah squeezed through the windshield frame, grateful for her small build. Inside the truck, the world looked different. Everything was sideways and broken glass covered every surface. The smell of gasoline was overwhelming, making her feel dizzy and nauseous. Jessica lay pinned beneath the collapsed dashboard, her face pale and frightened. Sarah could see that the woman's legs were trapped, but thankfully there wasn't any visible major bleeding. However, the awkward position and the fact that Jessica couldn't feel her lower body suggested serious spinal compression. "Okay, I'm here," Sarah said softly, placing her hands gently on Jessica's head to stabilize her neck. "We're going to do this very carefully." Using the crowbar, Sarah began working to lift the dashboard just enough to free Jessica's trapped legs. The metal groaned and shifted, and she prayed that her efforts wouldn't cause the already unstable vehicle to shift position. As she worked, Sarah could hear the crowd outside growing larger and more agitated. People were shouting about the gas fumes, and someone yelled that they could see the fire truck's flashing lights approaching. The pressure to work faster was enormous, but Sarah knew that rushing could permanently injure Jessica. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 90 seconds, Sarah managed to create enough space to carefully slide Jessica's legs free. Now came the most dangerous part, moving someone with a potential spinal injury through the tight confines of the crashed truck and out through the windshield opening. "Jessica, I'm going to support your head and neck while I slide you toward the opening," Sarah explained. "You cannot try to help me or move on your own. Let me do all the work." Just as Sarah began the delicate process of moving Jessica, she heard someone outside shout, I can see flames under the engine." Time had run out. What had been a careful rescue was now about to become a race against death itself. The shout about flames sent ice through Sarah's veins, but she forced herself not to panic. Panicking now would kill both her and Jessica. She had to move fast, but she also had to move carefully. One wrong move could snap Jessica's spinal cord and leave her permanently paralyzed. If they both survived the next few minutes. "Jessica, listen to my voice and stay calm," Sarah said, positioning her hands to support Jessica's head and neck in the proper alignment. "I can hear the fire trucks right outside. We're almost out of here." Sarah could indeed hear the rumble of heavy engines and the shouts of firefighters setting up their equipment, but she could also smell something new mixed with the gasoline fumes, the acrid scent of electrical components beginning to burn. Whatever fire had started under the hood was spreading. With movements she had practiced countless times during emergency training, Sarah began sliding Jessica toward the windshield opening. Every inch required careful coordination, supporting the woman's head with one hand while using her other arm to guide Jessica's body. The crowbar had given her just enough room to maneuver, but barely. Glass crunched under them as they moved, and Sarah felt several sharp pieces cut through her scrubs and into her arms and legs. But she ignored the pain and focused entirely on maintaining Jessica's spinal alignment. She had seen too many accident victims whose rescuers meant well but caused permanent damage by moving them incorrectly. "Ma'am, fire department," a voice called from outside. "We need you both to evacuate immediately." "I'm a nurse," Sarah called back without stopping her careful work. "This woman has a suspected spinal injury. I need 30 more seconds to get her out safely." "We don't have 30 seconds, the firefighter responded urgently. "The engine compartment is fully involved. This thing could go up any minute." Sarah could see the orange glow of flames reflecting off the remaining windshield glass. The fire was spreading faster than she had hoped. But Jessica was halfway out now, and stopping would mean leaving her trapped in a burning vehicle. "I'm not leaving her," Sarah said firmly, continuing to guide Jessica through the opening. "Get your backboard ready." As Jessica's shoulders cleared the windshield frame, Sarah felt the truck shift slightly beneath them. The fire was weakening some of the structural components, making the already unstable vehicle even more dangerous. She could feel heat beginning to radiate from the engine area. "Got her shoulders?" one of the firefighters said, reaching in to help support Jessica's upper body. "Keep supporting her head." Working together, they managed to slide Jessica completely out of the truck and onto the backboard that the emergency crew had positioned nearby. Sarah crawled out behind her, finally allowing herself to breathe properly as she moved away from the gasoline fumes. But as soon as Jessica was secure, Sarah heard something that made her heart skip. A soft crying sound was coming from the other side of the overturned truck. "Wait," she said to the firefighters who were preparing to wheel Jessica toward the ambulance. "Do you hear that?" Everyone stopped and listened. There it was again, definitely crying, and it sounded like a child. One of the firefighters ran around to the other side of the truck and shouted back, "There's a car seat back here." Kid looks to be about 3 years old. Sarah's heart sank. In all the chaos and urgency of rescuing Jessica, no one had noticed that there had been a child in the back seat of the truck. The little girl had been so quiet during the rescue that they hadn't known she was there. "Is she hurt?" Sarah called out. "Conscious and crying, but I can't tell how badly injured," the firefighter replied. "And this side of the truck is closer to the fire. We need to get her out now." Sarah looked at Jessica, who was now being loaded into the ambulance by paramedics. Then she looked at the overturned truck, which was burning more intensely by the minute. Thick black smoke was starting to pour from under the hood, and she could hear the crackling sound of flames consuming plastic and rubber components. Every instinct told her to stay away from the burning vehicle. She had already risked her life once and succeeded. The smart thing to do would be to let the trained firefighters handle the second rescue, while she stayed safely back with the other bystanders. But when she heard that little girl crying, Sarah knew she couldn't just walk away. She was small enough to fit through spaces that might be difficult for the firefighters in their bulky gear, and her medical training might be crucial if the child was seriously injured. "Which side is she on?" Sarah asked, already moving toward the truck despite the growing heat and smoke. "Sarah, no," Jessica called out weakly from the ambulance. "You already saved me." "Don't go back in there." But Sarah was already assessing the situation on the other side of the vehicle. The little girl sat in her car seat, which had remained surprisingly secure during the crash. She was crying and reaching towards Sarah, but appeared to be alert and responsive. However, her side of the truck was much closer to the engine fire, and Sarah could see that flames were beginning to spread along the underside of the vehicle, toward the passenger compartment. "What's your name, sweetie?" Sarah asked the little girl, her voice gentle despite the urgency of the situation. "Emma," the child replied through her tears. "I want my mommy." "Emma, I'm going to get you out of here and take you to your mommy," Sarah promised, though she had no idea if Jessica was actually the child's mother or if there had been someone else in the vehicle. The firefighters were setting up equipment to cut through the truck's frame, but Sarah could see that would take several minutes they didn't have. The fire was spreading too quickly, and the smoke was getting thicker. Once again, Sarah realized she might be this child's best hope for survival, and once again she was about to risk everything to save a life. Sarah didn't hesitate. While the firefighters worked to position their cutting equipment, she squeezed through the rear window opening that had been partially cleared of glass. The heat inside the truck was becoming unbearable, and smoke was starting to fill the passenger compartment. She had to work fast. 3-year-old Emma sat strapped in her car seat, tears streaming down her face but thankfully appearing alert and uninjured. The car seat had done its job during the crash, keeping the little girl secure even when the truck flipped over. But now that same safety device was keeping her trapped in an increasingly dangerous situation. "Hi, Emma," Sarah said softly, trying to keep her voice calm and cheerful despite the crackling flames she could hear getting closer. "I'm Sarah, and I'm here to help you get out so we can find your mommy." Sarah quickly examined Emma for any obvious injuries. The little girl was scared and crying, but she appeared to have full movement in her arms and legs. No visible bleeding, and her eyes were tracking normally. That was good news. It meant Sarah could move her quickly without the careful spinal precautions she had needed with Jessica. The car seat's harness system was complex, designed to keep children secure in exactly these kinds of accidents, but the crash had twisted the seat slightly, making the release mechanism difficult to reach. Sarah worked her fingers around the buckles, trying to free Emma while smoke continued to build around them. "Sarah, you need to get out of there now," one of the firefighters shouted. "The fire's reached the fuel line." Sarah could see orange light dancing on the windows, and the temperature inside the truck was rising rapidly. Sweat poured down her face as she worked frantically with the car seat buckles. Finally, she heard the satisfying click of the harness releasing. "Okay, Emma, I'm going to pick you up now," Sarah said, lifting the little girl from her seat. "Hold on tight to me." Emma wrapped her small arms around Sarah's neck and buried her face against Sarah's shoulder. Despite everything happening around them, the child's trust in this stranger who had appeared to rescue her was complete and heartbreaking. Sarah turned toward the window opening, but immediately realized they had a problem. The space that had been just large enough for her to crawl through alone would be much tighter with a child in her arms. And the broken glass around the edges would be dangerous for Emma's exposed skin. "Catch her," Sarah called to the firefighters outside, lifting Emma toward the opening. "We can't reach her from this angle," one of them replied. "You'll have to bring her closer to the opening." Sarah maneuvered carefully, trying to position herself so she could pass Emma through the window safely. But as she moved, her foot slipped on some debris inside the truck and she felt herself falling backward. She twisted her body to protect Emma from the impact, landing hard on her back with the child still clutched safely in her arms. Pain shot through Sarah's shoulder where she had hit the truck's interior, but she ignored it. Emma was crying harder now, frightened by the fall and the growing smoke. Sarah could taste the acrid fumes in her mouth and feel them burning her lungs with each breath. "I've got equipment positioned," a firefighter called. "Pass her up now!" Sarah struggled to her feet, fighting dizziness from the smoke inhalation. The truck's interior was getting hotter by the second, and she could see flames beginning to lick at the edges of the passenger compartment. They were almost out of time. With every bit of strength she had left, Sarah lifted Emma toward the window opening. This time, the firefighters were able to reach in and grab the little girl, quickly pulling her to safety outside the burning vehicle. "Now you," the firefighter shouted to Sarah. "Come on!" But as Sarah tried to climb toward the opening, the truck suddenly shifted. The fire had weakened one of the support points, causing the vehicle to settle into a new position. The window opening that had been her escape route was now partially blocked by debris. Sarah tried to squeeze through the smaller space, but her jacket caught on a piece of twisted metal. As she struggled to free herself, smoke filled her lungs and her vision started to blur. The lack of oxygen and the stress of the rescue were taking their toll on her body. She could hear voices outside, firefighters coordinating their efforts, paramedics calling for additional ambulances, and somewhere in the chaos Emma crying for her mommy. But the sound seemed to be coming from very far away. Sarah made one more desperate attempt to free herself from the debris blocking her escape. She could feel the heat of the fire getting dangerously close, and she knew she had only seconds left before the situation became unsurvivable. Just as her strength began to fail and darkness crept into the edges of her vision, she felt strong hands grab her arms and begin pulling her from the wreckage. The firefighters had managed to clear enough space to reach her. As they dragged her clear of the burning truck, Sarah's legs gave out completely. The adrenaline that had carried her through 2 impossible rescues was finally wearing off, and her body was shutting down from smoke inhalation and physical exhaustion. The last thing she remembered before losing consciousness was the sound of the truck's fuel tank exploding behind them, sending a fireball high into the air. She had gotten both Jessica and Emma out with literally seconds to spare. As paramedics worked to stabilize her breathing and load her into an ambulance, Sarah had no idea that someone in the crowd had been recording the entire rescue on their phone. Within hours, the video would be spreading across social media platforms, showing the world what real heroism looked like. Sarah woke up in a hospital bed with oxygen tubes in her nose and the steady beep of monitors surrounding her. Her throat felt raw, her lungs burned with each breath, and every muscle in her body ached like she had been hit by a truck, which, she realized with dark humor, wasn't far from the truth. Sunlight streamed through the window, and Sarah was confused about how much time had passed. The accident had happened in the afternoon, but the light looked different now. A nurse she didn't recognize was checking her IV line. "How long have I been here?" Sarah asked, her voice coming out as a harsh whisper. "About 18 hours, the nurse replied with a warm smile. "You've been in and out of consciousness, but the doctors say you're going to be fine. Smoke inhalation, some cuts and bruises, and exhaustion, but nothing permanent. You're one lucky lady." Lucky. Sarah supposed that was one way to look at it. "What about Jessica and Emma, the woman and little girl from the accident?" The nurse's smile grew even brighter. "Both doing well, thanks to you. Jessica has some spinal compression injuries, but the doctors are optimistic about her recovery. And little Emma doesn't have a scratch on her. She's been asking about the nice lady who saved her." Relief flooded through Sarah's chest and she felt tears prick at her eyes. It had all been worth it. Every moment of terror, every breath of toxic smoke, every cut from broken glass. All worth it to know that both lives had been saved. "There's something else you should know," the nurse continued, pulling up a chair beside Sarah's bed. "You've become quite famous while you were sleeping." Sarah frowned, not understanding. "Famous?" The nurse pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a video that had already been viewed millions of times. It showed Sarah crawling into the burning truck, emerging with Emma, and then collapsing as the vehicle exploded behind them. The footage was shaky and taken from a distance, but it clearly captured the rescue. "Someone posted this yesterday evening," the nurse explained. "It's been shared on every social media platform you can imagine. People are calling you a hero." Sarah stared at the phone screen, watching herself risk her life for strangers. It felt surreal to see the events from an outside perspective. In her memory, everything had happened so fast, driven by pure instinct and adrenaline, but watching the video, she could see how dangerous the situation had really been. "I was just doing what anyone would do," Sarah said quietly. "No," the nurse replied firmly. "Most people would have called 911 and waited for help. You risked your life twice to save people you had never met. That's not what just anyone would do." Over the next few hours, Sarah began to understand the scale of attention her actions had received. Her phone, which had been recovered from the accident scene, buzzed constantly with notifications. Messages from friends and family, interview requests from news stations, and thousands of comments from strangers around the world who had seen the video. The story had struck a chord with people everywhere. In a world that often seemed filled with bad news and division, here was a clear example of someone putting themselves at risk to help others. The video had been accompanied by the caption, "Real hero saves 2 lives in burning car," and had spread faster than anyone could have imagined. But the attention that touched Sarah most deeply came from an unexpected source. Late that afternoon, her doctor knocked on her door with a visitor she hadn't expected. "Sarah," the doctor said, "there are some people here who wanted to thank you personally." Behind him stood Jessica, in a wheelchair but smiling broadly, and little Emma, holding the hand of a man Sarah didn't recognize. Emma broke free and ran to Sarah's bedside. "You're the lady who saved me," Emma said excitedly, climbing up onto the chair beside Sarah's bed. "Mommy said you're a real superhero." "This is my husband, Mike," Jessica said, wheeling closer to the bed. "He was out of town when the accident happened. Emma and I were coming home from the grocery store when that other car ran the red light." Mike stepped forward with tears in his eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," he said simply. "When I got the call about the accident, I thought I had lost everything. But because of what you did, my wife and daughter are going to be okay." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the emotion in the room. She had acted on instinct, never thinking about thanks or recognition. But seeing this little family together, knowing that her actions had kept them from being destroyed, filled her with a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. "The doctors say Jessica's injuries will heal completely with physical therapy," Mike continued, "and Emma keeps telling everyone about the brave lady who crawled into the scary truck to rescue her." As they talked, Sarah learned more about the impact her actions were having, beyond just the 2 lives she had saved. The video had inspired other people to take first aid classes, volunteer with emergency services, and generally be more willing to help others in crisis situations. But Sarah was about to discover that her moment of heroism had caught the attention of a group that would change her life in ways she never could have imagined. The next morning, Sarah was preparing for discharge when her nurse rushed into the room with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Sarah, you need to look outside," the nurse said, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. "Right now." Confused, Sarah walked to the window and looked down at the hospital parking lot. What she saw took her breath away. Hundreds of people in military uniforms were gathered below, standing in perfect formation. Marines, soldiers, sailors, and airmen filled every available space, and more were still arriving. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, her heart racing. Before the nurse could answer, Sarah's doctor appeared in the doorway accompanied by a Marine Corps colonel in full dress uniform. The colonel removed his hat as he entered the room and walked directly to Sarah. "Ms. Martinez," he said with deep respect in his voice. "I'm Colonel James Patterson, commanding officer of Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego. We're here because word of your actions has spread throughout the military community, and we wanted to thank you personally." Sarah stared at him in amazement. "I don't understand. Why would the military care about what I did?" Colonel Patterson smiled. "Ma'am, what you did exemplifies everything we try to teach our Marines about courage under fire and never leaving anyone behind. When we heard about your actions, every unit in the San Diego area wanted to be here to honor you." The colonel gestured toward the window. "Those 500 Marines, soldiers, sailors, and airmen down there have been calling you hero since yesterday. They insisted on coming here to meet the woman who showed them what real courage looks like." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she looked down at the sea of uniforms. These were men and women who had dedicated their lives to serving their country, many of whom had faced combat and dangerous situations around the world. The fact that they considered her actions worthy of their respect was overwhelming. "There's more," Colonel Patterson continued. "The Commandant of the Marine Corps has decided to present you with the Civilian Medal for Heroism. It's rarely given to non-military personnel, but your actions that day embodied the Marine Corps values of honor, courage, and commitment better than anything we've seen from a civilian in recent memory." Over the next hour, Sarah found herself surrounded by military personnel who wanted to shake her hand and thank her. Many of them shared their own stories of rescuing people in dangerous situations, and they spoke about how her actions had reminded them why they chose to serve. A young Marine corporal named Rodriguez told Sarah that he had shown the rescue video to his squad during training. "We use it as an example of what it means to put others before yourself," he said. "You didn't have any military training or special equipment, but you did what needed to be done anyway." A Navy medic named Thompson explained that several medical units had analyzed Sarah's rescue techniques. "The way you handled the spinal injury evacuation was textbook perfect," she said. "You probably saved that woman from permanent paralysis by taking the time to do it right, even with the fire spreading." But perhaps the most moving moment came when an older Army veteran approached Sarah with his grandson, a boy about Emma's age. The veteran had tears in his eyes as he spoke. 30 years ago, my unit was pinned down in a firefight overseas," he said quietly. "A medic risked his life to crawl out and pull me to safety, just like you did for those people. I never got to thank him because he didn't make it home. but I want to thank you for showing my grandson what a real hero looks like." As the formal ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Sarah realized that her life had been permanently changed by those few minutes of chaos and courage. The video of her rescue had now been viewed over 50 million times worldwide. She had received job offers from emergency medical services, invitations to speak at medical conferences, and thousands of letters from people inspired by her actions. But more importantly, she had learned something about herself that she never knew before. In that moment when she heard Jessica crying for help, and later when she realized Emma was trapped in the burning truck, Sarah had discovered that she was capable of extraordinary courage when others needed her. The Marine's recognition meant the world to her, but what mattered most was simpler than any medal or ceremony. 2 weeks later, Sarah received a drawing in the mail from Emma, showing 2 stick figures, one big and one small, standing next to a truck with the words, "Thank you for saving me," written in a child's handwriting. That drawing now hangs in Sarah's apartment, reminding her every day that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose to put others first. The Marines may have called her hero, but Sarah knew the truth. Heroism isn't about being fearless or having special training. It's about seeing someone who needs help and deciding that their life matters more than your own safety. 6 months later, Sarah left her job at the hospital to become a paramedic, inspired by her experience to dedicate her career to emergency medicine. She often thinks about that afternoon when she dropped her groceries and ran toward danger instead of away from it. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives last only a few minutes, but their impact can echo for generations. For Sarah Martinez, those moments taught her that being called a hero by 500 Marines was nice, but knowing that Jessica and Emma were alive and healthy was everything.